Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wireheads. It is currently episode 36. Wow, episode 36. Oh
yeah.
We are almost to 50. We are nearly there.
We're kind of a real podcast. It's
I know, right? Well,
I should also share the chat, huh? Let's bring everyone. Let's bring you all together, chat.
Come
just
together.
So that if you're here with us live. Yeah. There we go.
All right, there we go. Everyone's together now. Lovely.
Everyone, you should be in one little column so I can address all of you, and Diamond can do the same.
All right.
But yes, if you are watching this, not to interrupt Diamond's intro of her half the episode, but if you are watching this in a recorded format, either on Spotify or YouTube, we do stream this live on Twitch every single Thursday evening, and you can come be part of it and ask us questions and talk with us while we are live. We welcome it, as a matter of fact. So if you'd like to, please come by, join the conversation. Even if you're not able to stay the whole time, like we welcome you to be part of it. If you ask a question and then have to leave, you could see it in the recording anyway. It's a win-win.
All right. So with that, we are currently at episode 36. I just turned 26 years old yesterday, so yeah, that yesterday was a bit busy, but yeah, we're here. So we would be talking about the Demiplane release that happened today, where the character builder has come out, which now that that's out, I will work on a full review for Demiplane as well. But we're going to look into Demiplane together, see what kind of resources it provides. Also, it's kind of neat that the Demiplane team is super responsive over in the RTAL community. I think that is super, super cool.
Meredith's been popping in and out of there for, I mean, really since Demiplane's launch, she's been active in there, but overall, today especially with the launch of everything, she's been basically just going nuts in there, answering questions and responding to anything that people are bringing to her, whether that be topics that they aren't sure about or pricing things or whatever. So it's been very cool to see that.
So instead, today we're talking about shaking up the story, ways that you can run your Cyberpunk RED campaign outside the traditional, group of ragtag edge runners getting gathered together by a fixer to go do a job for starts. There's a bunch of other ways that you could spin a Cyberpunk story, and we've decided that's going to be the full episode today, just because there is a lot of different ideas out there. So
yeah, we're gonna talk about a couple different angles, especially I think, and this may fall under my half of the episode, depending, but talking end games especially, because I know that for me, a lot of, if you've watched Neon Inferno or play in any of my games, you'll know that by the end of your typical campaign, the street starts to look a little distant. It starts to feel a little less important or appropriate for the players and their power base. And so we're gonna talk about some ways that you can align on the street still without the need to massively change the game essentially as well.
And on my half of the episode, which is this half, we're going to be talking about different ways that your campaign may start. So I suppose, Emmerron, just for an idea of how we want to look at what a campaign is, it seems most of our campaigns are somewhere between 20 to 25 sessions for a story.
Yeah, I'd say that by and large, if you're telling a pretty complete story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and not doing, because I know there's kind of two ways you can look at Cyberpunk campaigns, I think, in general. One of them is very narrative heavy, which I prefer, quite honestly. In general, TTRPGs to me are a way that we collaboratively at a table get to all sit down and then cooperatively tell a story together. So I think like narrative-based campaigns are kind of my bread and butter, the way I like to approach it. And those top out, I will say, typically at about that length, and usually power-wise, you're about rank 6 or 7 usually by the end of one of those. And I think that is perfectly appropriate. Like a lot of tools I feel like we get in the core rulebook, the higher role ranks beyond like 7 are less for the players and more for the NPCs in a lot of cases. Like,
and
if you're playing a more open living world kind of thing or West Marchy style thing, it's very possible that you take a player character beyond 7, but it's hard to tell a story that has like grounded stakes that feels very cyberpunk, I feel like, once you hit that level.
so with that in mind, folks, the when we look at campaigns, and also I would like to take note, rank 7, rank 8, that's basically hardened. That's what hardened mini bosses and boss level characters.
Oh no, you're a hardened boss at 8. Like,
right.
You're just a full blown, because a regular boss is 6. Hardened bosses can go pretty much as high as you want them to, but like 8 is unless you're talking like, I think Adam Smasher is the literal only stat block in the game right now
that has a 9
roll rank higher than 8 in anything.
I think right, because I think Crusher is like what? I think Crusher is rank 8.
He's like, only rank 8.
He's only stepped down from Smasher, and still Smasher is a far cry from Crusher.
Well, and there's one other NPC that I'm quickly double checking.
Mr. K.
I think Mr. K is a 9 as well, but he and Smash are the only 2 rank 9 anything in any of the pre-written material we've gotten so far. Beyond them, we are because hold on, I'm looking at Mr. K. There you are. Mr. K is a rank 9.
So
I had to test my memory on that.
So to set the scope for what we're talking about as a campaign throughout this entire episode, we're looking at somewhere between 20 to 25 episodes, or sessions, or runs, whatever you want to call it. So ways that we can look at telling a story here. There's some fantastic examples actually in the core rulebook, outside the typical Merc group. And we go to such a group at, what page is it here?
I think it's the like selling your soul section during character creation. I think is what we talk about.
Page 390, meet the teams. It's in the game master section. So
got it.
I mean, there's that, and we'll bring up some other ideas as well. But like, there are some groups in here that you and your crew could sit down and be like, okay, what if we tell a story from this point of view? So we have neo corporate teams right out the gate as the first one. Of course, maybe not for your first Cyberpunk campaign. You don't want to play a bunch of corporate muscle, but this could be fun. Definitely. What comes to mind when I read this one is a story much like that of Adam Jensen with Deus Ex, for example, where you are very much doing work for the corporation, but you are also trying to find what's in it for you at the end of the day.
Right. You're still your own person to a fair extent. It's just the conflict with that kind of a story, I think, usually comes in the form, those are more going to be very social in a lot of ways in terms of where the conflict spurs from, because your conflicts are mostly going to be interpersonal ones. And the end conflict, your end game, a lot of the time you're setting up as a GM in that, in my mind, is you're asking the question of the players, what is more important, your job and the payment you receive from it, or your morals and your ethics? which of those wins out when you know, the rubber meets the road? Which side are you going to lean toward?
And I suppose some ways that you could really like tell this story. I did it with our pilot season Black Spark in a hybrid sense. Very much your team is given this big job that needs to be done before the fourth quarter reviews come up, and your boss is looking at you like, get this done, or we're all going to the street.
Yeah, the ship's sinking if you don't get this hole plugged right now. And then it's the interesting twist that comes out of a story like that in general, not specifically saying Black Spark, but just in general, is that what does it take to plug the hole? You know,
what are you willing to do
ethically or morally, like something you can stomach to do what's necessary to make that happen? That's the hard thing.
And I mean, we look at that, and I like it where, you know, it is very much how far are you willing to take things to get the job done? Are you even willing to complete the job? Are you willing to risk it all for doing what you think is the right thing? So that's something neo-corporate teams can offer. Perhaps maybe you're a group of corporate spies. Maybe you're a corporate hit squad. You know, a whistleblower is getting a little too loud, and you guys have to decide, is this something you guys want to do?
Yeah.
Do you want this guy to have an accident that has multiple bullets in the back of his head? That's what I'm saying.
Well, and the interesting thing, that's where a campaign like that can start. I think for each of these, it's also interesting to mention what are the mid-season twists, if you will, right, that you can throw at your players.
Oh, absolutely.
If you have like if the assassination gig, because you can do this during a single gig as well, but especially if that gig it's like more of a manhunt where you're going after this one person, and it takes multiple gigs to build a case, to find their whereabouts, to make the plan to hunt them down, get the tools necessary to maybe infiltrate that if it's a highly secure building or compound of some kind. In the doing of all of that, the fun twist as GMs we can throw at them is, well, what has this guy done? Moreover, who are they? Like, are they someone that you could actually stomach killing? Like, maybe they aren't as bad as whomever has put you on their trail has led you to believe.
Watches that. Or what information does this guy have that it will impact you in a way if you decide to kill this guy?
Yeah, like you personally directly are influenced by, or maybe it's what could they barter for their life in that same context. Yeah, it's very interesting. That's where a lot of those like tragedies, especially those where it's like, yeah, you have a family debt, like a blood debt or blood feud or something, and whatever that NPC has on you, they could potentially call an end to all of that, right? They could, with the right call to the right person, suddenly make all of that vanish. Well, suddenly that life path becomes a far more, it's not a footnote anymore. It is the point of the campaign in a lot of ways. So it's very interesting to throw those curveballs at your players in the middle of a neo-corporate type campaign like that.
Yeah.
And the end games can still be very flashy, I think, in that context as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bands. This is kind of one that I thought would be kind of interesting. It doesn't have to be like a group of oops all rocker boys. You could be attacked and you have bodyguards. Maybe you are trying to do a social movement, and you as a band are involved in this. Of course, you're going to need, your muscle. Perhaps you have to do some other gigs to get the place set up. Like, perhaps you need certain things that you can't just find easily. Or perhaps you're maybe that one promoter that you guys have had has been being a bit too much of an ass. You need to make them disappear real quick.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like it does lead to some like, because you could tell kind of two stories, I feel like, with a rocker group, right? One is very much rebel against the corporations in a very samurai-esque sort of feel, where like maybe it's not as bombastic or far-reaching as what Johnny ended up doing, but where the things samurai stood for very much rebellion against corporations, the structure that they built, all of that, and like playing dive bars all the time to like rally the troops, so to speak. The other is very much like we're just trying to play and make a way for ourselves in the city, and rival bands or their corporations backing them are trying to make sure you stay out of the way, right? You are too dangerous to be allowed to live and thrive within the city. And so at least early on, maybe those same those other entities that are kind of on the same level as you view you as a threat, and that is the threat you're constantly kind of contending with.
I suppose if we had to look at like midway for like the midway twist for rocker groups, one thought I had is like, yeah, you think you're doing the right thing, but apparently what you're doing is actually harming more people than it is doing good. So you have to decide, are you going to do the thing that benefits you, or do you turn the page? What's your choice there?
Could you throw an example of that for like a rocker based? Because
Okay.
I could picture that for like a neo corporate, but not for rockers so much.
So say you're a group of zoners that decide that throwing these very loud concerts to get the attention of the rest of the city, that hey, South Night City needs these resources, and trying to get as much of attention as possible. You think you're doing the right thing. You are getting maybe some people's attention, but instead of it being the corporations and the city council, instead you get more cop raids is what you get, more enforcement projects, if you will.
Yeah. So so it's more like you become the squeaky wheel, and the grease is the NCPD coming down on your head. And that is the so yeah. So something where you are so idealistic, like your group is overly idealistic, and reality comes down as a hammer. That is, I mean, that's a fair little mid-game twist.
But it's not just you. It's the cargo village that you're out of that's suddenly getting evicted. It's the corporations decide, we'll take this over, and here's Zarafa building a new factory on top of where your house was.
The other thing you could consider as a mid-game twist that could be fun is invert the conflict, right? In other words, if you start off as we're a corporate backed rocker group to an extent, right? You have to have a corporation promoting you, right? So Sizzle Jams or Tower Records or someone, right, is supporting or some subsidiary thereof is supporting your rise to fame, right? And so maybe early on, like I said before, your rivals and adversaries are typically other rocker groups or their backers that are getting in your way. If your gigs are usually, at the end of the day, you trying to overcome those obstacles that other groups are throwing in front of you. Maybe though, at the halfway point, we flip that on its head, right? Suddenly you realize, oh wait, no, the corporation that's been sponsoring me all the time, they are doing something to harm these other rocker groups, and that's the reason we have a target painted on our back. And it wasn't obvious before, right? Like we are the thing that they are presenting as a problem in a lot of cases here. They're not really doing the job that is supporting us so much, other than like saying, well, yeah, the controversy is good for the optics or whatever. They're viewing it in a wholly capitalist, this is our investment, we'll use it like we want to. And so suddenly the problem isn't the other groups anymore. If anything, you all commonly can rally against the corporation, because now you recognize, oh, they're really the problem here. Our own corporation we thought was supporting us is now our problem, and we actually need to do something about it. Like in a way, you look at a great example of this actually is in 2077.
Us cracks.
You play through, yeah, us cracks and Carrie Eurodyne, because Carrie is very much in that same slump of like, my music's not doing so well anymore, and like all of a sudden you got these young fucking pop bands that are taking over, and like rock is dead. I am irrelevant because they're in the limelight now, and I need to be relevant again. So what am I going to do? I am going to go against them because suddenly they've been given a blessing to like cover a track of mine, and I'll be dead before I let them do that. And it's only once you get like neck deep in that shit and realize, wait a minute, it was the record label that gave the okay on this. It's the record label that pitted us against each other. It is the record label that actually we need to rebel against. And so that becomes the later part of that story is, what does it look like fighting back against your corporate overlords? As a group, essentially, like as a collective, all the bands can get together and be like, we all have a hand in what comes next, kind of thing, you know? So yeah, that's I think a pretty interesting way to like mid game into the end game on that.
All right. And honestly, I think bands would actually be also pretty good for, especially if you're a group of like, you know, artists. If your group is artists, musicians, and other very free souls, I feel like that would be a really good group to run with. One of the other ones they recommend is cults and booster gangs. This one, I don't know how I feel about this one in particular. Like, I can see it working for some groups, especially if, because the way they have it described here is it's not for NPCs these days. Any group of players can aspire to be a booster gang or another cult. Basically, you're all violence, full speed, such as like the Kill Crashers. I don't know, like, if this would really work for like a long-term campaign, would it?
For running cults and booster gangs?
I mean, like, at some point, like, yeah, it's got to get old robbing like your seventh bodega in a campaign.
Well, booster gangs can be as organized or unorganized as you make them. We see I am not, by the way, when I say what I'm about to, I am not proposing that you should run a campaign where the good guys are the fucking RCL. Okay, let me be very, 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 very clear about this. But if we look at an example in the narrative of a booster gang that does something massive out of nowhere, the Red Chrome Legion does something very big at the beginning of Hope Reborn. Those who know, if you're a GM and you've read Hope Reborn, you'll know what that is. For our listeners who have not, please don't go looking, because it is a wonderful little twist in that campaign that sets a lot of it up. And so I would not want you spoiling yourselves.
They did steal an armored Militech train in Red Chrome Cargo.
They did that too. And so that's kind of my thing is, your booster gang type campaigns are by necessity going to be very street level. They're going to be extremely punk. And what the booster gang stands for serves as the late game potential conflict, right? Because if you're in a gang like Maelstrom, where like the leader isn't dumb, right? Like we talk about Warlock and kind of what he stands for. I mean, Warlock's very smart. He's very intelligent. But the gang is full of psychos.
I mean, he's basically turned Maelstrom's rank and file into this cyberware, like, refurbishing. Basically, they aren't a corp, but they seem to sell a shit ton of cyber.
Well, and that's kind of that's where we look at it more like, to use a different game that Diamond's been playing quite a lot of on stream lately, look at Star Citizen and look at the gangs in there, right? They organize...
Yeah,
at a huge level, right? As big as any of the corporate entities we see in Stanton.
Yeah, rough and ready.
That is what a booster gang. A booster gang is just a different type of organization that does things not by a book, right? They don't have codified hard rules all the time for what they're doing and how they're achieving their ends. But they do have an agenda, they do have a goal, and the conflict for the players very well can turn into, well, do you want to support that goal? Or again, does it run counter to your moral fiber and who you are? Could there be a situation or scenario in which when the other side presents their end of the story, do you really want to abide by what your corporation in the booster gang is doing here? Same thing with the cult. Cults are actually great story telling elements for that, as long as your players are like down with the very depraved way that can quickly unfold.
Basically, groups like the Reckoners or the Inquisition. Ooh. Because I remember when we were doing one of the stories where the Reckoners were involved, they were just preying on the poor. Like, oh.
Yeah. And so it's very much a case of like, hey, if you're starting in a group like the Reckoners or the Inquisitors, and like that's your character's starting point, you might hit a turning point very early into the campaign where you're like, I don't want to abide by this anymore. I want to get out, right? And now suddenly the campaign narrative shifts from this is your origin story, but it is not what defines who you will become in the campaign as a whole. And you might survive getting out of there,
Personal growth,
or you'll die trying to escape. And again, that type of a narrative could play very, very, very differently at very different tables. So it is not going to be for everybody.
Yeah.
But if you get people to agree on this being the way they want to start the game, there are absolutely paths that take it beyond simply being you're part of this street level group of people that want some very depraved ends or very depraved means to an end. You might break with them not long into the campaign and decide there's a better way to survive in the city than to be part of this.
Yeah. Now, I do think this would be a real fun one, especially if you decide that your campaign's going to be set in the combat zone. And yes, I know I'm going out of the book, but I've decided that, we'll look at these and we can also spin on some other ideas as well. We have the Reclaimers. Now, the Reclaimers, yes. Of course, you're very much going to be kind of like an organized crew where you're going out finding stuff. But this could be, simply you guys, and not gonna lie, Hope Reborn. You could, take a few pages out of Hope Reborn for playing a Reclaimer group. Maybe you guys are finally getting together enough to a point that it's getting a little too crowded where you guys are staying. So it's time to, find something else to reclaim and build a new. Go find an apartment complex to take oh my god, the apartment would fit well in a campaign like that.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Reclaimers, I feel like, especially for those of us who've been around Red a while, when you hear the word Reclaimer, a lot of us, I think, at least for me, I tend to think of nomads, because a lot of what Reclaimers are trying to reclaim are settlements just beyond the edge of the city that were abandoned in the rush to urbanize Night City in the 2020s, but are now needing to be used for settlement now that the center of the city is, it's partly been irradiated, and the other half of it just about is a combat zone.
Rocky Ridge.
So it's like one of those things is like only the north and like the north and northwest parts of that central island are even kind of safe. So Reclaimers are trying to like find better places for more people to live. And a lot of those crews are supported by both community effort as well as corporate interests. So it's kind of like you have, again, some setups for things similar to kind of what we've already talked about, where you're reclaiming these settlements, but it's kind of like being colonial, right? There's a colonialism aspect of that is, well, when you go to reclaim the area, who is still living there maybe? What are you, what are you killing or eradicating culturally? by moving in with your own idea of what that settlement is going to become, or that area is going to become.
Or perhaps you got to curry favor with the neighborhood as well. You know, your crew comes in looking for home, and you gotta know who are the power players before you can get in and, you know, start rebuilding. And other missions might take you to go find water. Like, you know, Rancho Coronado, I feel would be a great spot for a reclaimer campaign, because like the utilities are just gone. So, you know, you're out trying to find water. So you might have to deal with, you know, stealing from the albino alligators, or finding a way to source water without having to rely on them. You know, you're going out to find, you know, other parts and pieces to, you know, get your home up and going. And I feel 100%. I feel like that's a fantastic way to go about it. It makes for a really good, like, longer term campaign as well, or even a West March on top of that. Especially if you're a growing community.
Yeah, if you're a growing community, or if you really are going like hard nomad, a reclaimer campaign can take you out of the city even.
Yeah.
So those of you who don't want to simply use Night City as the backdrop and keep within the city bounds, because I know that a lot of Artal said as much lately, that they are pretty much laser focused on using Night City as the setting for Red.
Mm-hmm.
But if you aren't happy with that, or would like to explore the world beyond, and you've got you're up to the challenge, so to speak, as a GM, of like developing the the world beyond the city, a reclaimer campaign is pretty excellent for that, honestly.
Perhaps you got to go into the city to go get the stuff you need. So, you know, maybe, you know, your different gigs are adventures, you know, from home to the city.
When we hear about urban reclaimers a lot too, where they're reclaiming like specific blocks or things like that. That are maybe lost to combat zones.
Next group, this one's a pretty straightforward one of medtechs, solos. Even a media could fit quite nicely in this bunch. Trauma team. And I feel like this one, like, I could see there being like a backstory to this, but like your different gigs are definitely, your different sessions are going to be you going out to do rescues. Like, this is very much for your combat, like your full action groups that want to get out there and, you know, do some beat 'em up.
You land, you start, either you draw guns on people or start shooting pretty fast. It's high octane. There's some really interesting human stories you can tell in the context of Trauma Team 2, though. I know that there's a 2077 based graphic novel series entirely about Trauma Team, and like what can happen on the job, and it tells it from a very like human, on the ground level of like, what does it take to be part of an organization like that is as militarized as they are. And in the 2040s, something very interesting that I learned about them last year at Gen Con in 2023 was they're gig workers. They're like Uber, but for medical emergency. So they're very much like just hovering in their AV. That's why the response time is so good, because they're just sitting in their AV, stationed as near as possible to an uncovered block of the city from every other Trauma Team response unit, hoping that theirs is the one that gets pinged when one of those calls comes out.
Perhaps, perhaps you got to go up against REO Meatwagon. Like, you know, they're coming in to snatch up your patient.
Are. Yeah, they're ambulance chasing in the biggest way possible. So it really is like, there's some really good human stories that still come out of a thing like that. But I agree with you, Diamond. Yeah, like if your group is looking to like go balls to the wall octane and just like knock things down, you know, kick down the door, shoot the guys on the other side that are standing between you and your objective, the patient in this instance, a Trauma Team campaign, you can do a lot worse than a Trauma Team campaign.
You could, and also looking at it, it could also be you are sitting there, you know, maybe you're a bit like one of my med techs, where it's just like, I don't know if I can keep, killing people just to save lives. I don't know if I can keep doing this, or other folks like that. Perhaps maybe there's some stuff going on up at corporate that you're catching wind of. It kind of follows alongside neo corporate, but not quite as closely tied.
Yeah, I would say that, like, well, Trauma Team is a very specific flavor of neo corporate, because Trauma Team is in itself kind of a neo corp, despite them being around in both the 2020s and later in the 2070s.
Well, yeah, they're Trauma Team North America in the 2040s, so
right.
They're little,
very much, because they the flavor that, or the shape, I should say, that the organization takes in the time of the Red is an extremely it's an extremely unique shape, because gig work, as we all know, in the modern day of 2025, is it can be utterly hellish and dehumanizing in a lot of ways, but you need to do it because the paycheck is what gets you to the next month.
Yep.
Right. It is probably, I would argue, of all the ideas posted in the book, it's probably the most rents due as the motivator kind of gig.
And with the long-term humanity lot, oh my.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a very interesting and compelling narrative.
Also encountering horrific death.
Mm-hmm. You're seeing tons of shit on the job, because that's the thing, right? No one likes to play a lawman in the strictest sense, right? We've talked about this in some of our recent episodes. If you're playing NCPD, there's I feel like, especially if you're a newer player in the cyberpunk setting, there's like a pretty deeply held aversion in a lot of ways to that, because they view, I feel like
cops aren't
punk and cop are oil and water. It's not, you're not going to blend those genres very well without a shitload of creativity. But if you think hard enough, you can do it. But Trauma Team is the easy answer to that, where it's like, it's tell the cops nothing, tell your doctor everything, right?
Yep.
Well, Trauma Team is your doctor. So, but they're coming to the same scenarios as the NCPD would, but they've got a very different objective when they're trying to get in and get out of that. That and it's a very human one that we can all relate to. Everyone has seen Medical Emergency, and if you're like,
yes, I have
background of living in a and I am, to those of you who can relate more strongly to what I'm saying and I'm about to say, my heart goes out to you, because I have not gotten that in my background, and I am blessed to not have it. But at the same time, if you live in a combat zone or a violent area, the medics, they're going to come and they're going to probably try to drag your ass out, but Trauma Team are medics with guns. And when they come in and leave, it's again, high octane, drama filled affair. And the people who are doing the responding to that, tangent, but it's relevant to this kind of a narrative. They just sentenced an 18-year-old today, who over the last 2 years made nearly 400 swatting calls from a variety of schools, hospitals, libraries, all those sorts of things. And so to hear the way that, your 911 operator has to hear and respond to something that is very possibly active violence happening in that moment, with gunfire sounds and everything happening in the background, thanks to this asshole that was doing this, that is what a Trauma Team campaign is going to encapsulate, is all of those elements that go into someone like that doing that sort of thing.
And that it is rough. I suppose then, if we were to, and just as a side note, because I'm down to 15 minutes left on my side here, but just as a side note, with REO Meatwagon, here you are taking advantage of people. Your corporation wants you to take advantage of these people. You are stealing Trauma Team's clients. and you are charging them double what Trauma Team would to get the medical care done.
Already a lot. Like Trauma Team's rate is already a lot.
$500 for the basic service. You don't get you don't get surgery. You get the basic treatments to get you to the hospital, but that's it. Platinum, you get surgery on the go to make sure that you're okay.
Yep.
So of course,
otherwise they'll just pump you with a stim and hope for the best kind of thing.
All right. So next group, Mercenaries. A lot of us have ran in mercenary groups. I like, and that's gonna be like your mix of a fixer, solo, netrunner, medtech, tech, and maybe a nomad thrown in there all together. Like we've all told Merc stories. You are doing one contract or another, learning about yourselves and each other, learning very personable stories about each other as well.
Mm-hmm. I'd say that mercenary campaigns are like the quintessential cyberpunk, like that we understand, especially people coming from the background to 2077 are going to be the most familiar probably with this because it's pretty much V's story.
Like, what my group on the for Emmerron's crew, we've watched as this band of friends like slowly start. If I had to look at it from like my new fixer's point of view, like just watching like what was like a very close group kind of start fraying apart because cyberpsychosis, loss of a very close friend, the pressure of these very high octane contracts, and now corporations breathing down their necks, and you watch as either this group stays together or they explode, and it's fun to watch when they explode.
Yeah, from the GM seat, it's especially fun because you could have whole half-hour sections where like you're not touching it, you're just literally sitting back, hands up, and you're like, I'm gonna let this play out, and then all of a sudden your group has just injected more drama and more
the theatrics are great
excitement than you ever could. You're just kind of like, all right, sick. My job is done for me. It's great.
Yeah.
But
now
it is interesting toward the mid game and the end game with those because they are very much wild cards.
You
can do whatever feels right and it'll work.
Like you start off as your standard merc out the gate. You're a fledgling merc taking little contracts, but then you start to grow in your own field and become that guy for a bit, and then we watch whether you die a hero or you become the villain. I've noticed a lot in merc stories. Gangs.
Betrayals and turncoat corporation types also can feature pretty heavily in that.
Penelope.
It's like, oh, you've just done this job for me, awesome. So here's a new contract, and when you're sent out on that contract, they co-hire a hitman to come find you because they know where you're going to be.
Yep.
And they've decided you're like. There's a great adventure from the Jumpstart kit that I've used before at my table.
Definitely not.
You'll know. Definitely not Kansas. Yeah, there it is. That very much is featuring of elements like that if you scale them up to like a higher power level, they work really, really well as the mid to late game of a merc campaign.
The way I've ran that one before is just like, wow, this is a really easy job. Why'd they hire us for this? And then boom.
Yep.
All right, next one. Next way that stories could be told is maybe from instead of a booster gang or a cult, gangs. This could be this could be you're with the Tiger Claws. And Tiger Claws and Sixth Street can also fall under lawmen, but like I'm kind of thinking like with gangs, you're very much more. You're part of the neighborhood defense. You're maybe part of a watchdog group. You're part of a resistance corp. Or not corp, not core. You are literally doing like counter corporation stuff, counter law stuff. You are maybe running your own drug trade with the piranhas.
I would argue that this is kind of fascinating to me that they bother differentiating gang and booster gang because to me they're kind of the same thing. The stories you're telling are very, very similar between them, I think. It's really down to like the booster gang element kind of opens you up to more like common cause. I feel like Sixth Street, for example, would be like one great example of a gang that very much fits the envelope, but usually your gang's gonna have a purpose they even mentioned in the book, like, think of like World War II resistance gangs and things like that.
Robin Hood
When
and
we
his
start
merry
considering
men.
that. Yep. So it's, you're out not just for like, I think Neon Inferno season 2 kind of even starts like this, where it's like you're playing for a power broker within the old combat zone who wants to secure the place, make sure that it stays a place that people can live and thrive, and resist like the corporate interests that want to take it over. Even if it's not so clear that that's what's at stake at the very beginning of that season, it quickly turns into that, and it's a resistance against that. So yeah, that is you repeat the comment, I think, a lot of what the booster gang thing looks like for you there.
Next one, and you don't all have to play nomads for this, but you could, be part of a nomad pack. A great example of this is the Sightseers. Let me pull up the Sightseers. So nomad packs. Well, the Sightseers is a Aldecaldo's a nation. Sightseers are the pack, right?
So a pack. So it goes pack, family, nation.
Okay.
So your family is like, if we think about it in the context of 2077, just for most of our viewers who would have that contextually, because I know a lot of that is where people have fed into Cyberpunk tabletop wise from that. If you look at the Aldecaldo family that we help, that Saul leads, right? That's Saul's pack, right? That's Saul's family. Within that family, we have several packs that do different things, right? We have some of the old guard that typically are doing more of the typical nomad, go boost the train kind of gigs that we can get kind of tangled up in. We have other packs like the Panzer Corps people that are now part of this nomad family that are more about defending and making sure that the machinery that can help protect the family, or even further beyond that, even just keeping the transports running so that at a moment's notice you could pack up and go if it comes to that. But that's kind of what each of those packs has a function within the family as a whole, and the family is there to mostly make sure that the functioning can kind of continue, and that no one pack's ideals is like suddenly this pack is completely acting against what the family wants. That's where we talk about Panam and her wild ideas. She's the only one with them, so she's just kind of left to, like, when she decides to leave, they're like, fine, you can leave. Like, we're about protecting the whole instead of the individuals here. And so, but even in that context, we think about, people like Carol, who are part of that family. She's a netrunner.
Yep.
Like, she's not a nomad as we understand them, like Panam is. She's a netrunner.
The Sightseers are a mixture of solos and nomads. Of course, you're going to have techs that are working on whatever salvage shit they drag up out of cargo containers or wherever else in the city that the stuff's found. You definitely might have fixers that, well, obviously you do. You got, one giant 7-foot one for the Aldecaldos, fucking wood chipper.
Yeah.
So you got fixers that, deal with, stuff there. Red Tail is an Aldecaldo med tech from the Core 10. So
and then there's also, like, if we look at techs in the context of a nomad group, people like Mitch that are by and large they are techs, but they know how to fight. That's just what we talked about, I think, kind of last week, is you build a tech that has the ability to be a sniper as well. That's kind of Mitch,
Oh, Scorpion. God, that hurts. Every time I think about Scorpion, I get upset. Anyway, fuck, that hurts. Of course, finally, just to round things out, there's like a few other stories that could be introduced. You got lawmen, which, yes, I know cops aren't punk, but
PIs can be punk. For evidence of that, look at what's the big one that there's a Cyberpunk story that everyone knows, Disco Elysium. There it is.
Yep.
For example of like a lawman story that can still be very punk in Cyberpunk.
I mean,
PIs tend to run afoul of the law just as much as any other group does.
And unfortunately, despite how bad he kind of got the shaft of the 4 romances, River literally butts against the NCPD's corporation by the time of the 70s, yep. But basically goes headlong against the NCPD to solve the case of Peter Pan, if you would.
Yeah. And that's very much going to be what your PI story kind of looks like, I think, is what Rivers ends up being.
And then, of course, you have lawmen like Rook, who, never mind, he evolves into a PI. Fuck.
Yeah. Same story. But that's to say, like, lawman stories as a campaign very much can be like, there's a case that you just can't let go. There's that, the one that got away and that maybe caused you to break from the broader NCPD on either a philosophical or maybe just full on professional level. Like, you no longer work for them. You did until you realize that they're just as corrupt as any other gang in the city. And now you want to do it your own way. And the people around you are the people who help you do that.
And I mean, if I was to look at it from the NCPD point of view, maybe you're one of those last few pockets of people that like you're doing it. You still keep that bright and shiny, doing it to keep it for the public trust or for the public interest instead of the corporations that own you. Maybe you have a fixer that's that works Vice. Like what they have up here, fixers maybe from Vice. You probably have a netrunner that runs that digs that does maybe they're from Netwatch.
CSI,
yep.
Like forensic net stuff is definitely a big thing.
You got some solos from Tac Squad. A media that either films what you guys are doing or perhaps might be a boiled investigator themselves.
CSIs take a lot of that, the more technical roles in an alarming campaign, I think, and those are just as valid because that a lot of, if you're playing a alarming campaign, prepare to play it more like Blade Runner than a typical Cyberpunk would be. I would say. Yeah. So if you've got a very investigation forward party, both lawmen as well as the next team we'll talk about both pretty well fit into that archetype of game.
And perhaps maybe instead of work for 6th Street themselves, or not 6th Street, NCPD, perhaps you work for the Tiger Claws or you're working for 6th Street and you guys are getting put up to deal with, hey, there are a bunch of murders happening on our turf. Figure out who the fuck is doing this and kill them.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So did we have anything else we want to talk about lawmen before we go to the next one?
I was about to bounce to the next one here.
Beautiful. Then we're on the same page.
Finally, as Emmerron was saying, for investigative groups, we can look to the likes of N54 in Danger Gal Dossier for an example. You got media teams. Perhaps you're a crack group of medias that are working for Never Blink News. Maybe you're independents that are posting stuff in the op-eds, and or you might even be the ones that are producing a social movement via the stuff that you're finding instead of emotionally moving the crowds to do so like Rocker Boys do.
Yep.
Of course.
And I mean, you might play. There's some very there's a very interesting middle overlap between Rocker Boy and media at a certain point where you a
media darling.
Both of you are trying to wake the city up to do something. One of you wants it done now. One of you wants to gather the truth and present it to the masses and let them make up their own minds about what that means.
And like they suggested here, maybe 2 or 3 medias. I would say at tops 2 medias, so there's not too much heavy overlap. Yeah. But 2 rumors, if each media draws a different rumor that are both relevant to each other, that's super fucking helpful.
Media is a pretty heady role, and I would argue, like a lot of people, it's funny. Just this week I've seen a lot of criticism on, as usual, this is not a new debate or new commentary, but there's a lot of people who say, oh yeah, Netrunner really like grinds the game to a halt when you start playing Netrunner and doing net running. I would argue that that is highly dependent on the GM and how they choose to balance the time. But media is, in my opinion, actually more monopolizing of time potentially than a Netrunner, because there is so much that only a media can do. And if you have two at the table, it can get doubly difficult to kind of push things forward, because both of them are going to be looking at things in a very granular way that the rest of the party may or may not be looking to do. And that's the struggle if you have more than a single media.
And I look at, like a media, if I was to look at a media crew, like you got the media themselves, perhaps, they're not the one that presents things. Yeah, they have the rocker boy, get all dolled up and put up on the screen. You got a Netrunner, fishing stuff out of, corporate servers that they shouldn't have. Of course, if you get to be a media that gets just a little too good at their job, you're going to get the corporation's award for excellent journalism in 556 or 762 or 308 if you're really a problem. So you need a solo.
You're leaving 30-06 out of this.
Yeah, 30-06 as well, of course. Or if you're known to have some subdermal armor, probably some 50.
But yeah, you're gonna get a lead-based punctuation mark on the story.
Absolutely.
At some point, yeah.
So you need some solos.
It's pretty much the way it is.
Or nomads. Yes. And perhaps if you really want someone that knows their way around, especially if you're a media that's digging into, government business or corporate business, government business, corporate business, it's all the same. Or 40 millimeter, they know you have friends. True.
SCC's on it, yeah.
You might have an exec with the group who, they might work alongside the media, and they might be able to get you get your stuff on the right desk, talk to the right people. Same with fixers.
You could argue the same for fixer, honestly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is an interesting little campaign to run through, and your end game is probably going to involve what I consider one of the most powerful acts any group can do within Cyberpunk, which is you can reshape the way that the city or groups within it work.
Matchlight.
Just dismantle them altogether because you've written the story of the century, basically.
Fucking Matchlight.
Yep. Matchlight is a perfect example of exactly why medias are so powerful. They're in my opinion, like in terms of what a single person is capable of, media is the most powerful role in the game, but they're a carry role. You need to and I don't say that to say medias are incapable of doing things properly on a session to session basis, but the real power doesn't come until late in a campaign, and they have to survive to the end of the campaign to do their big things, right? So that is where mission to mission, the solo or a Netrunner or a tech could have more impact than a media, but in the long run, the medias, I think, usually land the hardest with their impact, simply because they are doing things that can reshape the city as we know.
Yeah. And then one last one that they have up here is don't give up your day job. Now, if I looked at this could really be seen from a gutter punk level where, you are rank 0, you bought a gun, you bought some armor, you get that that 100 Eddie job. Each of you guys get 100 Eds to go do that job. It is don't give up your day job.
It's the idea too is you can moonlight one to the other. So don't be afraid to expand beyond the stereotypical lens of your character. And we've said this a lot as it applies to lawmen, but I would argue this applies to exec's another great one that we need to keep in mind. This applies to, but even things as much the example they give in the book is a rocker boy that maybe their day job is they're a trauma team medic. They've got the first aid skill of a trauma team, assistant medic in a crew, but that's not where their heart is. It's not their passion, right? Well, they want to sing, man. If only someone would believe in them.
I suppose another thought, and I want to bounce off of it here. when you said trauma team, it's Red's due. Suddenly, that exec that you saved is waving $1,000 at each of you guys. Hey, I need you guys to find the guy that did that, and I want bullets put in him.
Right. This is a private, personal request. 1,000 eds to each of you if you can hunt the asshole down that put me on my ass and nearly killed me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is a very real. The last one here is more of a catch-all, and it's just to keep your mind open.
Yep.
No one campaign needs to be defined by one through line the whole way through it. It just definitely helps us as GMs to sit down and think as we plan the more overarching element of a campaign, and to think all the way through it, so that way we can like focus our energy and then remain flexible if the players take it a different direction than maybe we were thinking. So like having a meta narrative is good. Don't ever get married to your long-term meta narrative though.
Yep.
It will change almost certainly.
Yeah, we went from a group of mercs to a group of almost terrorists. I don't know how we got there in the Monday crew, but here we are.
Look, if your edge running crew is not called a terrorist group by at least one corp or one lawman by the time you're done with it, did you really edge run? Like, that's at least
that's fair.
My experience.
That's fair. All right.
If you're accused of being a group of terrorists at least once, you haven't really done an edge run.
So, yeah. And so we'll be continuing talking about shaking up the story on Emmerron's half of the episode here. And like end games, like how do we really, change things up like in the latter half of your story? We've talked about how you start. Let's talk about how you get to the end. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to follow me on, my channel over here on Twitch and Emmerron's channel here on Twitch. Both of us would greatly appreciate that. Click on the link below in the description to take yourself to part 2. And with that, we will see you on the other side. And if you have questions for us, don't be afraid to email us over at wireheadspod@googlegroups.com. Throw it in the comments section. And also Spotify, you can do the same thing. You put it in the comments section. And we will answer your questions one way or another. Or message us on Discord. But on that note, we'll see you for part 2. Bye-bye now.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Everybody.